The very first wrestling event I ever attended was a WWF house show when I was only 7 years old, so I do have a bit of an attachment when it comes to the idea of house shows. But sadly, in the modern era, there are some fans out there who can't imagine a world where the house show is all there is. And to make matters worse, it does seem that the quality of the house show has started to decline just a little bit. Which is a real shame, because there's some great reasons why the house show is totally worth preserving. And I just happen to have 7 of those reasons right now, because today, Dave knows 7 examples of what makes house shows great. Alright, it has been argued by some, including myself, that the house show might be obsolete in this day and age. But when I said that, it was only in a response to the fact that I think wrestlers wrestle way too much. And I do think that kind of leads to a lot of injury. I want to see wrestlers have a more reduced schedule, and this was before the brand split. But if a wrestler just wrestles his designated show and then a pay-per-view in the same week, I think there's no problem with that, and I don't think that's too much. So in a non-pay-per-view week, if the secondary show is a house show, well, that would be just fine, especially if the quality of house shows starts going up again. And it definitely should. And what do I mean by quality? Well, for that, why don't we just get into the list. Number 7. Dream matches. There are some matches out there that even if you spend all day probing the WWE network, you still won't ever find them. That's because these matches happened at house shows. Now sure, sometimes footage of these matches do exist, but that's not the point. The point is there are some amazing matches out there that only a select few ever get to know about. For example, how about The Undertaker's first run as WWF champion? Now it only lasted for a couple of days, so you'd think he didn't have any title defenses, but he did at house shows against the British Bulldog. Talk about a dream matchup. Or how about Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair? Sure, you might have seen them wrestle a bunch of times in WCW and eventually in the WWF, but what about during Flair's first run with the company? They were in the middle of a feud, but you never saw them wrestle. At least, not on TV. And even more so, what about this rare gem that happened on April 10th, 1989, when Bret the Hitman Hart took on Andre the Giant? That's right, Bret versus Andre. That actually happened. And it happened at a house show. Number 6. The ladder match. Now if you ask a lot of wrestling fans what was the first ever ladder match, most people will say the WrestleMania 10 ladder match between Shawn Michaels and Razor Ramon for the Intercontinental Championship. Now that might have been the first televised WWF ladder match, but it definitely wasn't the first. Ladder matches have a long history, and while no one's really sure what the first one was, we know it wasn't in the WWF. And we also know that the first ladder match in the WWF also wasn't at WrestleMania 10. Now the first ever ladder match for the WWF did feature the Intercontinental title as its prize, and it did feature Shawn Michaels, but instead of Razor Ramon, the defending champion was Bret the Hitman Hart, who successfully retained his title on July 21st, 1992, almost 2 full years before WrestleMania 10. Number 5. The Iron Man match. Now just like the ladder match, an hour-long match was nothing new for professional wrestling. But by the modern era, most bookers knew that it took a special combination of wrestlers to make sure that they could hold the audience's attention for that long a match. And when you had the right 2 wrestlers, then you knew you had to take advantage of it and give the match a go. And in the WWF, that happened, but before WrestleMania 12. But this time around, it would be Shawn Michaels that would get switched out, as Bret the Hitman Hart did defend his WWF Championship in 60-minute matches, but against wrestlers like Ric Flair and even his little brother Owen Hart, where he would successfully retain. And Bret's match against Owen on July 9th, 1994 is worth noting because back then it wasn't called an Iron Man match, it was called a marathon match. But what is noteworthy about this match is that when the hour ran out, Owen Hart actually had Bret in the sharpshooter, but Bret never tapped, which meant that the match had to go into sudden death overtime, and it did, and that's when Bret picked up the win. And if this is beginning to sound familiar to you, well, where do you think the idea came from? Much like stand-up comedians who take their act on the road trying out different punchlines before they finally get to their big TV special where they perfected it, that's exactly what a lot of house shows do. House shows are great for trying out new angles and new ideas just to see what works. What you think, they would just take a brand new concept and throw it at the wall at WrestleMania to see if it sticks? No way. They definitely don't leave anything to chance, and they definitely know these will work because they tried it all out at house shows. Number 10. Ty Dillinger. Alright, this whole entry isn't about Ty Dillinger, but he does serve as a great example of what makes house shows great even today. So as a personal example, at an NXT house show in Philadelphia, I saw Ty Dillinger standing ringside, rating all the matches from 1 to 10. Now this would be the beginnings of the Perfect 10 gimmick. And at this time, it was a special treat only for those who were there live, because working off a crowd reaction is how they know whether or not a gimmick is a good idea. So you actually have a hands-on part of the creative process to see what kind of gimmicks get made in the future. And if it wasn't for all the great feedback he was getting from the crowd, we might never have seen the debut of the Perfect 10. And not only that, NXT is known for doing a lot of great fun things at house shows, such as wrestlers making early debuts or saying their final goodbyes before being called up to the main roster, or even Finn Balor and Bayley reenacting Dirty Dancing. House shows are a place where wrestlers can let their hair down a little bit and be a little more free with their character. And you never know, they might discover something that they didn't know they had. And judging off of the crowd, we can be part of the creative process and actually influence the birth of brand new characters and angles and storylines, which I think is absolutely fantastic. Number 3, Hulkamania is here. Now, I could do an entire list about wrestlers who won their first world titles at house shows, but if we're going to talk about only one, you have to talk about Hulk Hogan. January 23rd, 1984, Madison Square Garden in New York City, New York, saw the birth of Hulkamania. Hulk Hogan took on the Iron Sheik, where he would win his first ever WWF World Heavyweight Championship. And this run would last 4 years, even seeing the birth of the very first WrestleMania, and it would also be on the line when Hulk Hogan took on Andre the Giant in their legendary WrestleMania 3 matchup. And so I just think it's an incredible thing that Hulkamania all began at a house show. Number 2, the King of the Ring. Now, you ask a lot of people about the King of the Ring, and they'll tell you that it's that awesome pay-per-view that WWF has kind of forgotten in recent years. Now, as great as the King of the Ring pay-per-view was, it originally started in 1985, long before it was ever televised. But unlike WCW house shows, which only seem to count when they're trying to pad the numbers for Goldberg's streak, WWF's house shows still had lasting consequences. And the King of the Ring is proof of that, because even though the event itself was never televised, its consequences were definitely seen on air. After winning the tournament, there were many King of the Ring winners that would re-debut on air with a brand new King persona. Take, for example, the Macho Man, who became the Macho King. And unfortunately for many, some of these coronations were only seen by a very select but lucky few. And number 1, the Royal Rumble. That's right, my favorite pay-per-view of all time isn't always a pay-per-view. In fact, the very first Royal Rumble wasn't aired at all, as it took place at a house show. So while most people think the first ever Royal Rumble winner was Hacksaw Jim Duggan, few people know that the actual first Royal Rumble winner was actually the One Man Gang. The One Man Gang won the first Royal Rumble on October 4th, 1987 at the Kiel Auditorium in St. Louis, Missouri. Now, this Rumble only featured 12 men, and Pat Patterson, the match's creator, wasn't even there. Now, no footage of this match exists, and most of the wrestlers involved don't really remember all that much about it anyway. But this wasn't the only untelevised Royal Rumble. In 1994, 2 Royal Rumbles were held as a special surprise for audiences in house shows. One was an 18-man Royal Rumble that happened in Osaka, Japan, and it was the only Royal Rumble to ever happen outside of North America. And this one would have The Undertaker as the last man standing. But then there was another Royal Rumble that was never televised and no footage exists of, and this one was a full-blown 30-man Royal Rumble, and this time the winner would be Owen Hart. So just think how cool that would have been. You go to a house show and you get a surprise Royal Rumble. How amazing would that be? There you go, that's my list of 7 awesome things that have happened at house shows, and the kind of thing I want to see house shows do more often. But what do you think? What are some of your favorite house show moments? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to give this video a big thumbs up if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching, and this has been Dave Knows.